All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to mini AMA on product management. I'm your guest host today. My name is Matt DeCure. You might recognize me from last month's AMA on Junior Devs. I am, I guess that you could call me a Minnestar super fan.
I like that.
And I'm founder of the Invisible Network. And I'd love to introduce you to our panelists. We have Katy Lyman from Total Expert, and we have Adrienne Peirce from Credly.
Yep.
Before we dive too far in, for those of you who are uninitiated, the mini AMA is sort of like on Reddit, how they do an Ask Me Anything, but we're doing it live or video, and this is the mini is because of Minnestar. And so with that, we'll get started. And one other thing before we go, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask us, feel free to drop them in the chat in Zoom. But otherwise, we're going to start rolling down the list of questions. So can you both introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about how you got into product?
I'll jump in. I'm Katy Lyman. I'm the Director of Product Management at Total Expert. Hi, Debra. See you drop that in the chat. I've been there for about 3 years. Before that, I actually had a variety of different roles that led me to product. I was on the operations team at a company, moved into an analyst role, got really curious about data and figuring out how to create a strategy from what I was seeing, and then became a product marketer and actually decided that collaboration with development was what really got me jazzed, and kind of hearing what customers were looking for and translating that was one of my big passions. So I was a PM for a while, and now I actually manage a team of product managers and help guide the vision for where we're going.
Awesome. I'm Adrienne Peirce. I work at Credly. I used to be a medical device engineer, so my path to product management was a little unusual. First, I got into software as a project manager, had a couple of roles there, and then really wanted to work more closely with engineers. So that was kind of the main reason I tried to find product management. I found my way into a role there and actually had no idea how much I would love it, but I totally did.
Excellent. Well, thank you. You kind of already alluded to this, but in my experience, every company has a slightly different definition of product management and project management. And I would love to hear for folks who, for the uninitiated and also for myself, what is the difference and distinction between product management and project management?
So for me personally, when I made that transition, this will kind of flavor this answer. The difference in my day-to-day was in project management, I was just pulled. And, there was deadlines and I had things that had to happen, and I just kind of let my work carry me through. And product management was quite a change to be more thoughtful and deciding what are we going to do, more strategic, and setting, being more proactive about what are the things that are important to spend my time on as a team, what should we be spending our time on, what should we be building. So that was a big change for me. And I think so when you really get down to the definition, it has an element of execution. There's deadlines, you have to make things happen, but it is much broader in that it includes strategy and stakeholder management and customer interaction and things that are much fuzzier, and it uses a lot more soft skills. So I think it's just a broader role. So
would you say that it's more strategic, and product is maybe more strategic and project is more tactical?
I would. Some of those tactical things are still part of the job. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Totally, yeah. The way we think about product management essentially at TE, and what I've done in previous companies as well, is that product management has to be both strategy and execution. Because if you're really, really good at the high level and you struggle to get things out, then you're not actually delivering the value that you hope for. So it's almost like there's an element of project management in being a good product manager, because you have to know what your end goals are. But it could differ from company to company. There are some companies that say project manager, and they're actually looking for somebody in product to have that bigger picture vision. Mm-hmm. And even when you look at some companies here in the Twin Cities, they use the term product manager almost as a specific physical product, or even something like a financial product that you might be managing. So there are so many different flavors. It's really, really important to have a good understanding of what they actually expect you to do, because it could be different all across the board.
Totally. And speaking of which, I feel like the other ones that I've heard, I hear product owner a lot too. Where does that fall in the mix?
Yeah, for us, we actually don't have POs.
Okay.
And the reason is because the idea of strategy and execution together has to be in one person. Being a smaller company, having delays in things like handoffs, where you define the strategy and then you give it to somebody else and say, okay, go do it. And you're going to slow down. It may be, taking you further away from the results. So we actually work end to end, which is pretty cool.
I will say that this differs a lot, and I'll use local examples. So I was just talking this morning with Brandon Anderson from Sports Engine. They have very clear product manager and product owner roles.
Mm-hmm.
So the product owner there takes up more of that tactical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But because they're separate, I think their product managers support sales more, for instance. So everybody's kind of got a philosophy here, but those two would work really closely together. Target, I believe, calls all the roles product owner.
Oh,
And
Yeah.
so no product managers.
right.
Yeah.
But the way they describe it is what we would probably say, oh, that's a product manager.
Mm.
So again, like you really have to dig in to know what the role is.
Yeah.
So it varies from company to company.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, well, with that in mind, I mean, I think it sounds like there's no disagreement that product managers are dealing with customers, and like you're trying to figure out what to build and what your customers need. Can both of you sort of talk through your approach about how you determine what a customer needs or wants and needs, maybe where the distinction between doing things that they want versus doing things that they need, or,
That's
or
a
different
really,
things to prioritize?
yeah, that distinction in particular is really important. And so we have a couple of different tactics that I like to use. Direct observation is always, the best way for me to start, because rather than coming in with sort of preconceived notions about what somebody's doing, I can actually watch them work to figure out how are they solving a problem today. When that's not possible, lots of interviews and research essentially, trying to figure out what do they say they actually want, and then what do you observe them doing, and figure out the gap, because otherwise the solution could look totally different. So that's I like to start there with that good base of what are they actually doing today, and what are the key pain points, and then trying to we do like a 2x2, where there's sort of a say versus do, and how are they thinking, how are they feeling, to try and get at that sort of where are they really experiencing problems, and how can I best help them with the least amount of effort.
Wait, so you have like an actual like script, like for like when you're talking to customers about like trying to get answers to those questions, and you have like a structured way?
Sometimes.
Okay.
It depends on the tool that we're using. So like in observation, I'll generally try to be really quiet. And the last one that I had on site, I couldn't help myself because the guy kept referring to me and nope, just stay focused. So we ended up just, bantering back and forth for a really long time, which isn't ideal. But it did help me understand, here is what he's saying. And then when I actually did get to the observation, I noticed that what he was saying was important, wasn't actually what he was doing on his machine. Like, okay, I can help with that. That's cool.
Yeah, it's like a really, customer interviewing is such a unique and interesting skill, and it's super fun. But there's always this idea, right? Like if someone asks you how often do you go to the gym, you're going to be like twice a week. Totally go to the gym twice a week. But if they actually checked your records, like that's probably not true. It's probably true for you. It's certainly not true for you. So there's always that difference there. And like, no, it's really easy for product teams to be like, no, they said that this is what they do. That sounds right. Like, there's so much value in like what really happens when they hit that interaction.
It's almost like the Steve Jobs example, where I feel like it's like he famously said that he's not building what people want, he's building what people need. Yeah, like they're not going to know that they need it until they see it.
Right. Or they've already made a guess at what the solution is, but we want to back it up and see what's the actual problem you're solving, because we might find a better way.
Yeah.
That's the question, is like, is there a better way to accomplish what they actually need?
Yeah.
Because so much of the time when people say that they want something, wanting is very binary. I have it or I don't.
Yep.
And so when you start to think about the idea of how am I going to measure success of this, and it's just did I deliver it or not, you probably missed something from customer insight along the way.
So it's almost like product is like a systematic approach to like figuring out what needs to be built. And
Yeah.
it's like weeding out the noise too, right?
Yeah. And it's, it's qualitative. It can be fuzzy, interviewing 6 people and like, what are the insights across them that we can draw and translate into a strategy? It's a different way of working than like, what technical specification am I implementing? And so that's kind of fun. It's a really broad role.
Yeah. So you both kind of already touched on this a little bit, but I was gonna ask about what types of customer research that you do, you conduct, and how often do you do it?
Sure. We do interviews probably several times a week, depending on what stage we're at in the project. face-to-face is always good. Like, you can actually see us on the video. We like to do the same thing when we can't get in person with customers. I actually like to bring customers on site with us, but also important is actually going to them. So that way you can see, do they have Post-it notes around their monitor, or are they turning around and asking Shelly for some document? So, those kinds of things I think are ideal in an early stage of a project. And then as you get further and further into it, where you've got a hypothesis around, what you think you should be doing, actually doing things like usability tests where you're directly interacting with customers, showing them how you think you might solve their problem and seeing where you've failed, which is way better than getting something in code up to production and going, oh gosh, this isn't what I thought I would do at all.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Yeah, and then we do a lot of those things too. It's such a luxury to go to a customer's wherever it is they use your product. We don't do a lot of that because it is like, can be kind of expensive. But another thing that we can also do is a lot of tests where like maybe you can fake something up and just put like a fake button in your interface and see who clicks on it. There's a lot of ways to like get customers to do something that tells you what they need.
Yeah, it's like mock-ups, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Getting real feedback.
Totally.
Neither of you mentioned like surveys. And it sounds like you're very focused on like actually like talking to a customer, getting direct feedback from them. Have you ever have you used surveys in the past, and like would you recommend them?
I personally shy away from because it is there's so much science there, and I'm not a highly trained survey person. So your the bias you can put into a survey is there's so much of it.
Yeah.
I think people who might work at bigger corporations where there's like a skilled person who's trained would probably use that more than
Yeah, we don't use it too frequently. I've used it just a tiny bit in the past, and I think, but my fear is introducing my own bias into the survey and then basing assumptions off of that. So wherever possible, that direct interaction, even if it's not in person, is totally preferred.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just feels like you're kind of coming with half of the solution, and then you've still got to do the work to validate that. And then you're even further from the person that actually responded because they're doing it in a vacuum where you can't see what they're doing. There's no influence there. So.
Yeah, you want that raw, unadulterated, like what are you actually experiencing?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So this was really a question about hot takes, but before we get into that, I want to make sure if you have any questions, if you're on the call, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in our chat. We have like a predefined list that we're going to sort of work through, but if you have any like very pressing questions you want to ask to our panelists, feel free to drop it in there. Also, I want to make sure if everybody can hear us okay. I presume everybody hasn't just been watching this yammer without being able to hear us for the last 13 minutes. Oh, wow. Thanks, Tiffany. Oh, wow. Okay, you can hear us. Great. Look at that. Incredible. All right. We're going to keep going, and this is probably like the hottest question of the day. What are your product management hot takes?
Such a good question. I don't know. I don't know if it's a hot take or not, but if you're not friends, if you don't have good personal relationships, you're probably going to struggle to get the insights that you're looking for. Like just in general, and there's this whole idea of bringing your full vulnerable self to work, and then of course there's the opposite where people say no, you need to separate your work and your personal life. But what I would say is honestly, if you're not authentic, people can feel that, and you're going to need the people that you work with in engineering, in product marketing, if you're lucky enough to have it across the company. You're going to need those people, and they're going to need you. And if you can't be who you are in front of them, you're really going to struggle to succeed, I think, in general.
I think that's really wise. That's true. I don't know, hot takes.
Yeah. What are like trends in product that you're like, oh, that's totally wrong? Like, what we already kind of talked about titles a little bit. Like, there's product manager, there's product owner, there's project manager. I've heard program manager. Like, I don't know.
That's not what Microsoft
Let's hear your feelings. I want to hear about your feelings, right? You're talking about like separating your feelings from your work. But the hot takes are like, what are your hot takes? What are your opinions that may be controversial?
I don't think this is controversial, but I think a lot of bigger companies too, but a lot of startups, they grow to a point. And like early on, you're so close to the customer because like that's how you're building your business.
Yep.
And then you kind of grow past that, you scale, and you think you still know who your customer is, but you're not really talking to them anymore. Now you're making all these decisions, and maybe your customers changed, maybe your market has expanded, maybe your market has changed. And I feel like you see this all the time. People think that they're really representing the customer in their decisions, and the reality is they're like so far from it.
Mm.
And I think it's so easy to do, and it's such a bummer to see. And it happens all the time.
So it's like speaking to, like, you might start out being very in touch with what that user experience is like, and over time you sort of diverge and you move away, but you still work under the same assumptions that you had originally.
Yeah, and I think part of that problem too is, this is very startup-y, this probably doesn't happen in bigger businesses, but founders can do their own product management for a long time, I think.
Totally.
Yep.
And that transition from founders are doing product management to I have a function, as someone who does product management, it's hard to know when to do it. Is it the right time? Are we ready?
Yeah.
And so there's some part in there where it's like, it's not getting done. So it's a bummer.
Yeah. And it's so critical too during those days, because I've been through that a couple of times where there is a transition to I've been the person that defines everything that we're supposed to be doing, because as the CEO, I am the knower of my customer. And I think where I've seen things be successful in the past is essentially demonstrating how you can add value to gain trust. It's all about trust, because especially in startup culture, the CEOs have spent their own money, their own blood, sweat, and tears in actually investing. And so showing, you care, you have passion for their baby and for their customers, that helps in making that transition a little bit easier. But, keeping them looped in ongoing is super critical, because otherwise, if you think you're going this way and they don't have the insight that you do from customer observation, you haven't fed that back, it can be really tense if you don't have that clear line of communication.
Yeah. Oh man, this hits really close to home, because literally as you're saying this, I'm thinking, man, when is the right time to bring in a product manager?
But you're doing it now, I'm sure.
Well, no,
Right?
I'm like you, like I'm running my own business and I'm running products for myself right now, but there will be a time in the future where it's like, okay, I have to delegate and like relinquish control and let somebody else take my baby and like foster it and run with it, right? So when is that right time to bring a product person in? Like if you're like an early stage startup or with a growing team. Is there a right answer?
I don't know if there's a right answer.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it just depends on your company and probably your comfort level too.
And maybe your market.
Yeah,
like maybe
totally.
Your market is so homogeneous and so big that you can operate with your existing customer knowledge for a very long time, right? And you don't need someone to help you figure out a new market and get to know a different customer.
Okay, all right. These are some very good hot takes. Nicely done. I'm going to go off script here for a moment, and I'm curious. Oh, wait, we have some other questions. Hold on. Caroline asks, what do you like about being a project manager? Why did you choose to become a project manager? I don't know if you mean product manager there, but what type of people become project managers? What are the characteristics of a project manager? You can answer some of those questions.
Should we assume product manager then?
Yeah. What do you like about being a project manager?
I like
Why did you choose?
the crazy breadth of it. That you're like using essentially like anthropology skills to like get insights from customers and like communication skills to share those. But at the end of the day, having like pretty technical conversations with engineers about when the rubber hits the road, what does this look like? I love that. That variety.
Yeah. That part's so fun. Like the engineering part in particular, I love my team. Like I'm actually still working with a development team today, because we actually just brought on somebody that's going to allow me to manage full time. And so, I'm genuinely going to miss the collaboration with engineering, but I think the type of people, or maybe the characteristics, and this is actually, I think, one of the questions we have, just being naturally curious. You have to want to understand why it's important for you to do something, because if you don't, you're going to deliver X. But if X isn't really the right thing for you to be delivering, then it doesn't matter that you did all that work. And especially in early stage startups, don't have the luxury of time or payroll to be able to say, I'm going to do whatever I want to and come out on the other side going, I don't know why that was important.
Yeah, it's almost like every day is different.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, understandably would be very attractive to a lot of people, myself included. And like that variability that you're working with engineers, you're working with different people across the entire organization, you're talking to customers, it's like, you kind of get to do everything.
Yeah. It hasn't really come up here, and I think you guys will operate in this way too. Like a role we haven't talked about is design. Like that's the other kind of partner here.
Yep.
And that of course ebbs and flows, whether the thing you're solving is more of like a feasibility question, well, then you're going to need your engineering partner more, or like you really have to figure out a whole new way to interact here. But I think that's a big part of it too, is like having those close collaborators is really fun.
Yeah,
And like just digging in together.
Well, you touched on it a little bit when you're talking about like talking to customers, because it's like we're borderline talking about user research,
Right.
which is like very much, I mean, and I guess that kind of skirts the line between product and design, because it's sort of right there in the middle. And you could literally be doing it as a product person or as a UX person, like a designer, right?
Yeah, totally.
We like to go in, we call it the triad. I've heard other companies use similar terms. I heard triumvirate the other day, which is cool. There's
Okay.
troika, like, yeah, but like your designer, if you're lucky enough to have one, your product manager and your engineering lead kind of all operate together. And the idea is, especially in early stage, you're getting all three of you as much exposure to the customer and the insights as possible. So that way you're all on the same page about, what are you doing and why is it important? And that the way that I like the reason I like approaching it that way is primarily then everyone can be on the same page but still play to their their strengths.
Mm-hmm.
So the designer can go away and come up with, oh, okay, I understood this was their problem, and they can design something in conjunction with engineering to say, okay, now I built this beautiful design and I know it's feasible. And the product manager goes, yeah, that'll solve the problem, and here's how we're going to measure it. It just, generally speaking, gets you better results faster if you are lucky enough to have that kind of structure.
Oh yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, it's great. It really is. It's great.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, as you talk about what the role is like what makes a good product manager? What are the...
Well, I think you touched on some of it, like general curiosity, empathy, like really, you have to represent the customer. That's like most of your job. So you have to really like deeply understand, like, why are they doing this? Why did they buy your software?
Yeah.
So those are, but then also I would rail against some people who say like technical understanding. Some people like to hire engineers as product managers. But I think that is less important than like the ability to communicate, ability to have empathy and curiosity around the business problems that you're solving.
So it's more about...
Depends on the product. Like if your product is an API, I don't know, maybe you do need an engineer.
Yeah.
So it's more about characteristics than necessarily experience.
Yeah, which makes it super hard to hire for, which I'm sure you're feeling all the time.
Totally. Yeah, it does, because there's got to be this sort of intersection between empathy and passion. Like I look for passion when I look for PMs, especially. There are tough days. You work a lot and you're collaborating with people that are equally as passionate because you're dealing with customers that, in the industry that I work in, a lot of the users are paid only on commission, which means that if we mess up part of their workflow, they're being less efficient and it goes directly to their bottom line. So there's a lot of desire to be able to demonstrate that what you're doing matters, that it matters to you. But then there's also curiosity and then data, like using the idea of being trying to uncover, how am I going to measure this? Why is it important? Show me how much of a problem it is. And getting to the root of that so that when you say, hey, triad, let's go solve this problem, that it's actually the right problem to solve.
Yeah.
Because you can teach industries and you can teach software programs, but it's really difficult to teach those sort of innate characteristics.
Yeah.
So that's usually what I'm looking for when I'm trying to hire.
Yeah.
Oh, here we have another question. What tools do you use to capture feedback and gather observational notes? Good question.
Yeah.
We have a really excellent customer success group. So they're really good at capturing, because they're just talking to customers all the time. So they'll capture like day-to-day feedback, and we use ProdPad. There's a bunch of tools out there in the world for this. And so then I can use that and be like, oh, this idea is coming up a lot. Does it fit into our strategic objectives? Maybe we'll pull that in. But in the actual like moment of interviewing customers, I am a pen and paper person. I have an interview script, so I know like to prompt myself to ask specific questions. But I'm definitely like a pen and paper person. I don't have any real tricks there.
Same. I've got a couple people that are going to a customer today, and they're flying out for today, tomorrow, and then they're back the next day. And we were talking about the mechanics of how this observation would work. And somebody observed that just typing, like the sound of you typing, can throw somebody off pretty drastically, because all of a sudden there's someone behind you versus I'm doing my job.
Yeah.
And so pen and paper in that moment is so, honestly, there's no substitute for it, as long as you can read your own handwriting.
Right.
It sounds silly, but it's true.
And then, I'm sure you guys do this in a similar way. Like everybody who was in that room, maybe you've done like 4 or 5 similar interviews. You kind of got to come together and be like, okay, like I saw this in this person and this in this person. Maybe that's a theme. Post-it note it up or however you do that.
Yeah. It's so tricky because it's like it's collective knowledge and everybody like catches different things.
Yeah.
And you definitely need to like synthesize it.
Totally.
But how
It's
you
hard.
synthesize it is super hard too.
Yeah, it is. And we, one of the UX designers at our company actually was dedicated to research before. I think, sorry, John, that's not right. But he actually, revolutionized the way in which we run our tests because he put together a whole template. We kind of had a prompt and here's what we were looking for and here was a text box that you could write in freeform.
Yeah.
And he actually came up with a much better way for us to efficiently capture, was it full success? Was it partial success? Did they not succeed at all? So that it was easier to actually create data out of the observations, which is awesome.
So is that like with like numbers or is it like circle a box or like check a box or something?
He actually used smiley faces in one version, which was great. It was like smiley face and then kind of not so great face and then frowny face.
Uh-huh.
But I think the most recent iteration that I've seen is different check boxes with sort of the success levels above it.
Oh, nice.
Mm-hmm.
We have a similar question sort of in line with that. And I guess you might have already kind of touched on this, but what kind of soft skills are needed for success? I think you said curiosity.
Yeah, I think we hit on a lot of them.
Communicating, yeah.
Empathy, communication.
Glad we already got that one covered.
Organization is important too.
Yeah.
I know we didn't talk about that too much, but especially if you're working on a lot of projects or you have a lot going on because you're kind of mid-stage, not being organized can really slow you down, which in startup world is not okay. So just having a good sense for you to think about what is it that I'm supposed to be doing and how do I know that I've done it. Could be a list, it could be Post-it notes, whatever method works for you as long as there's some method.
And I'm somebody who's easily overwhelmed. And so it sounds like a product role where you have so much incoming stimulation. Like that would be the epitome of like information overload, like paralyzed by just too much coming in. So I appreciate that that's an important like characteristic or ability to be a good product manager.
Yeah.
We have another question that is very much related. Do product managers need to be really outgoing?
So I was just talking to someone this morning about this who does a fair amount of hiring over at Sports Engine. And I think no. I think that all those characteristics we talked about can exist in anyone. It's not like you have to do some kind of TED talk, to get everyone on board. And I mean, you gotta be able to communicate and you gotta be able to be clear in your communication, but I don't think so. You have more people at your place.
Yeah, I think the flip side of empathy and curiosity is actually listening. And so it's whether you're outgoing or whether you're not outgoing, like I'm generally more reserved. It's more about knowing when the right moment is to ask the question and just letting the person actually walk themselves through what is the answer to the question I'm trying to give you. This is interesting because now, of course, we're spending all this time talking, but usually if you're the one that's doing most of the talking, what are you learning? So that's, kind of.
There's also another skill, particular to customer interviewing, that took me a long time to learn, which is just sitting in an uncomfortable silence that makes the customer answer the question. And it's just socially a skill that you don't, you move away from. You don't let an awkward silence just sit there. It's so important.
And I don't know if it's a Midwestern thing,
It
but
is.
there's also this want to sort of ask a question and then right away try and give possible answers to it.
To help them.
Yeah, but that's not actually helping them and it's not actually helping you, which kind of sucks at the end of the day.
Or they'll ask questions and they'll be like, so be like, what would you click to do this, do you think? And they'll be like, is this right? You just have to be like,
what
do you
What do you
think?
think? What do you think? Yep. It's so great. And I've actually found that I use that sometimes not in usability tests too, where somebody's like, well, where should I do this? Where do you think you should be doing that?
I give it to my children.
There we go.
Oh my gosh. It's literally just how you phrase the question.
Yeah.
And maybe you need to frame it to say there's no right answer to this, and the important thing for us is to understand how you're using this product, and what your thought process is and where you go. That's the important part.
Yeah, sometimes we used to, at my last job, frame this this is a test of us.
Yeah.
not a test of you. I don't know.
It's good to make sure
Everything
that's
you're doing is
clear
right.
at the from the get-go, right?
You will not fail. You are not failing if you can't do it. It means that we didn't give you the tools you need to be to succeed.
And that's what we're here to find out.
Right, exactly.
Oh man, that's good.
We have another question here. Are there any certifications that are helpful for product managers to have?
Maybe this is a hot take, actually.
Ooh.
So I think that having certifications is always great, right? Learning and growing is super important. I'm going to say I don't think it's totally necessary. Like, it depends maybe on the kind of job that you're looking for. And you know, you certainly could, but I think there's a lot that you can learn in general just from being curious, from observing, from if there's something you're super passionate about, finding people that are in your personal network to help you learn more about that thing. That's more of the way that I would traditionally approach it, but there's still value to be had there. I wouldn't say that it's anything you would have to pursue to be successful.
Like, it's not a requirement, but
Right,
probably
yeah.
doesn't hurt either.
It certainly would. Learning never hurts.
So since I support a product that is digital credentialing, I probably have a different take on this, that like structured skills are useful, but I still agree. I think there are ancillary skills that are maybe worth, you know, as you maybe move through your career, having some kind of certification that will help you, like data science or some kind of design basics. You know, things that just say like, I've gone to the care of developing my skill in this area that supports it as a whole. So I think some of those are more useful, you know, than like a product management.
I feel like I'm going to try to infer a little bit from their question, but like when I think about certifications in the realm of product, I think about Agile. And like certified Scrum Master, like certified product owner, like that sort of thing. Like this might be within the realm of hot takes. Like what's your perspective on those certifications?
That's actually the certification that I was thinking about when I gave my answer. So like those are, I think, learning is always good. Learning is always helpful, but ultimately you can get some of what you would get from those courses through a lot of other means, including direct observation, which I'm obviously a huge fan of.
Yeah.
I will say, like, some of those, I'm not sure I know exactly that those are one of them, might get you in the door. Maybe if you want to get into product management and you're not in it, get you in the door as a product owner at a larger company, get you some opportunity. If they're useful in that realm, perhaps. I'm not sure they'll really teach you that much about the job.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like where some of these questions are coming from is like, how do I know if product management is right for me, and how do I get that first job?
Right.
And I feel like, if nothing else, they're not being an answer to this is what a product manager looks like. Kind of means there's not like, it's not like you go to school for product management and then you go become a product manager.
Right.
Like, and we've already spoken to like characteristics, but if I'm looking for experience or credentials or something to prove to a company that they should hire me as a product manager, like what might that look like?
I can only speak to what I look for. So, it depends on the kind of company that you're looking for. Like, when you're talking to a UX person and you ask them a finite question, the answer is almost always it depends. And this is kind of the same, but essentially, if you can demonstrate that you have solved a problem and you can measure what the impact was of you solving that problem, usually that's a really good sign that you've got sort of the way of thinking about things that would lend itself well to product management. Otherwise, there are always the standard bullet points that you see on a lot of resumes, like I've managed a product roadmap, which is great because some of that's the job, so you kind of expect it. But just being able, when you don't have that kind of experience, to say this is why it is important that I did what I did, and you can say that I got it from observation, from data, from insight. You don't have to be a PM to be able to show that in your resume.
Yeah, I think that's a really good assessment. Like, there's a lot of roles that can get you to product management. And you just gotta like understand what part of your current role you can kind of focus on in the way that you're presenting yourself.
Yeah, so if you're somebody who's saying like, you're describing me to a T, like it's probably just a matter of how do you communicate the past stuff you've done that really speaks to this is why I'm a good fit as a product manager. It's really just communicating that. Right?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay. Another question here. How do you capture and track competitive and industry intelligence? Oh, and follow-up question, do you own this or do other groups, i.e. sales, own, and how do you manage any overlap? Ooh, big question.
In my organization, it is shared with sales and business development. I I guess maybe this is a hot take too. I think sometimes
Keep 'em coming.
maybe everything's a hot take. I think a lot of times people focus a little bit too much on competition because what you're looking at there is how can we be like someone else? And maybe they are smart about how to solve that customer's problem. Maybe they're not. But I feel like it's just way more exciting and probably leads to more success to just focus on what are people doing right now with your product. And maybe you'll uncover something you can do that your competitors aren't doing. And then that gives you an edge and you can win.
Mhm.
Yeah, anybody can build features, right?
Right.
You could look at somebody else's website and go, okay, they have this thing, I want to do this thing, and that's totally fair. But it doesn't help you stay competitive ultimately if that isn't solving the problem your customers need you to solve.
Yeah.
So in TE right now, it's actually kind of jointly owned between sales and product marketing.
Mm.
And I mean, product managers use that insight too, especially when we're approaching problems. Has somebody else already solved this? Is there a good pattern or mental model that our customers are expecting, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel if there's a perfectly viable solution that already exists?
Yeah.
And just trying to incorporate that into the product.
And sometimes there'll be a feature that is like such a roadblock for sales that even if we feel like it's not going to make us win the field, we just have to build it.
Yeah.
We just have to do it and we come to continue on and compete to win another day.
Yeah.
That's so tricky too, because like what you're talking about is are product decisions driven by customers, like existing customers, or are they driven by sales, by like future customers, right? And I feel like you hear that a lot where salespeople will come back and say, yeah, they're not interested because we don't have this one thing.
Yeah. And I think it's a balance. You're going to have to do some of that, right? We still have to make sales every day or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think like you're never going to like 10x anything if you're just like doing what everybody else is doing.
Mm-hmm. In an ideal world, I think it's a combination of both, right? Where you know what your current customers are doing and why they chose you and what they're looking for,
Mm-hmm.
Through your direct research or whatever method you're using. And then having that perspective of, who are the people that didn't buy your product and what are they thinking and what's important to them does help in creating something that's a little bit more rounded. So ideally it's sort of, it's both pieces, but it should always start with talking, in my opinion, it should always start with talking to the person that says, I'm not moving this deal forward unless you have this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's typically an underlying reason why.
Problem they're trying to solve.
Right, like
Yeah.
it's because if you don't have it, your productivity drops by 30%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
Reason.
I can start with that. Let's go.
I think a related problem that I think is a little bit harder is if you do think you're like, the next level, in your market, you have to be looking at peripheral market and people who aren't your traditional competitors, but half the time it's an Excel spreadsheet, or maybe it's
I feel like most of the time it's
financial
an Excel
regulation.
spreadsheet,
Yeah,
right?
totally,
Right?
totally.
Maybe it's financial regulations related to real estate, or maybe it's like the state of college degrees
Mhm.
and how that gets you a job or not. So it's like this broader picture, which is much harder to consume and takes a little longer to like really learn.
Yeah.
But that's when it's really interesting.
That's like, it's like once your company and product grows to a certain point that you're like, all right, we need to go up market or down market, and
Yeah.
we need to sell to completely different customers.
Right.
Oh man, that's a whole
And
new
which
challenge.
is the right market, which way to go,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like with this question, like I've seen product manager job titles, like job descriptions that said you're expected to do competitive analysis, and I'm curious, how often is that like a real thing that you're spending time doing? Like it sounds like as you've laid it out, product management is mostly figuring out what you need to build and gathering information to support this is what we need to do and here's how we measure success. But that competitive analysis, I've seen that on job descriptions and I'm like, I don't really want to do that. Like that doesn't sound like fun.
Yeah, it's not usually fun, but it's a helpful lens to make sure that you're doing the right thing. If there's one particular component that's missing and it's blocking a lot of deals, okay, fine. But like we usually call it kind of gap analysis,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Yeah.
What is this person doing that we don't do today? Is it strategically valuable for us to actually invest in shoring those gaps up? And if not, how do we make sure that everybody knows we know this is a problem we don't solve today?
Right.
We've intentionally chosen not to solve it, and here's why. Because you could build a lot of things just to say that you do, but then you have to maintain it, you have to scale it, you have to teach on it. It just makes it that much harder. Yeah.
Okay, next question. Can you describe what product management looks like at different size/staged companies?
No, I originally tried to get a Target person to join us, and it didn't quite succeed because I find this question really interesting, and I haven't done it at a big company, so I'm not very good at speaking to that. Have you?
No, I've been primarily in like early stage and mid stage startups.
So we're gonna guess. We're gonna just make up some stuff. I think at a larger company, you probably there's probably more of like a strategy handed to you, from which you derive your strategy for the part you have influence on. So that has its ups and downs, right? Your work's more defined, so you don't spend a lot of time trying to figure out, is this the right direction? And you probably have specific dedicated teams that you work with and that are working on the same domain as you, and there's a lot of boundaries probably. So there's efficiency there, right? Like you have very clear domain of like, this is what we're doing, these are the people that are doing it, this is the metric we're gonna hit. So I feel like there's probably some efficiency there. There's probably also some administrative challenge, right? You've got way more people to communicate to, way more things to coordinate, probably let alone the technology that you're gonna be using. So it's probably just a lot of, the trade-offs and trade-offs.
Yeah, I'd love to know the answer to that
I
question
know.
too. Because
That'd be fascinating.
yeah, totally. Because I mean, especially in really large companies, you would assume that the amount of problems that you could solve would be bigger because theoretically you've got bigger budgets, but I also don't know that for sure. So,
Right.
yeah. Basically, when I joined TE, I was the first product person there.
So you defined it.
Yes, which is fun and terrifying, and all of the things that go with that. Like I saw somebody had actually had a comment saying they were the first product person in and kind of taking over from the CEO.
Yeah.
And so in super early stages, like you may actually also be the engineering manager. Like there may not be anybody that's helping wrangle development, much less helping to define where you need to be going. Yeah. And then later in the way that sort of I'm operating today with my team. We're actually moving towards the idea of mission teams where each team essentially has a KPI and they're in charge of basically safeguarding that. There's a big difference between those two things because oftentimes you'll split up, depending on the product you're working on, sections of the platform. And you might have a PM that's assigned to that versus assigned to a metric. It really just depends, but I think it's almost like the bigger you get, the smaller problems you find having the more impact on the way you operate, and then making fine-tune tweaks to course correct.
Yeah. Oh man, this is fascinating because I feel like I've seen teams like engineering, like product teams oriented around products. I've seen them oriented around like specific areas, kind of like, but I haven't heard mission like aligned teams before.
Yeah.
I presume that was a very thoughtful, conscientious decision that was how you wanted to orient your team.
Yeah. So actually, Bridget Haymaker, who's our VP of product, came to us from Intuit, and this is actually part of the way that they structure their product management teams. You could always hand somebody a thing and say, "Go build this thing," and you'll get a result, and it's fine. But it's not ultimately as impactful as if they're the ones that are coming up with the idea of why it's important to solve that and defining. Here is the metric that you own, and you are the person that says, this is what I think we should do to have the most impact on that. There's just an awesome sense of ownership that comes with it. And you might come up with better ideas than if you had said, I want you to go build this thing instead.
And that ownership isn't just the PM.
Yeah, the whole team.
Tech team, the designer, like there's, an untapped world of ideas there.
Yeah.
If you could just set them on the right course.
That's I'm an engineer, and like I would love to be on a team that's like, we're on the revenue team. Our goal is to increase revenue.
Yeah.
Right?
What do you do?
It's like I'm bought in. I'm very clear to see like here's the problem, and that there's a lot of different ways to solve the problem.
Right.
That's a really smart way to do it.
Okay, we got some more questions here. What tricks do you have to increase the feedback cycle of your customers? And same person, in a startup, being the product manager, what other hats have you worn or still wear? And somebody just responded saying,
I don't, on the feedback thing, I feel like I have more feedback than I can consume. So I guess I don't feel like I need to increase it. Maybe that's because we have a really high touch customer success group. So it's not, it's easy.
Yeah.
It's easy for me. Oh, you good?
Yeah, same. And often feedback comes when it's helpful to you, but sometimes it's helpful to them just to say it out loud. And just giving feedback can actually be showing that you're listening is a good way to develop those relationships. But yeah, overall, I think I'm pretty set with our team. But if you're feeling like you're far removed from your customer, which is definitely possible potentially in larger organizations, having a really strong relationship with the people that are hand-to-hand, day-to-day serving them, like customer support, is a good way to sort of try and get a proxy of that feedback loop and that cycle time. It might be customer success, we call it customer support, live chat, whatever that is. That really helps if you are looking to get greater insight faster.
Yeah, I feel like if you have the luxury of having a customer support team, that's like they're the first line of defense and they're the ones talking to everybody. Like you kind of have a built-in filter for signal versus noise because you can hear what like customers are constantly complaining about. It's like, all right, this is a big problem because people keep complaining about this.
Right.
Versus one person requests one feature.
Totally.
And maybe they do it every day, but it's still just one person.
Right. Like somewhere in your organization, somewhere there is a place that somebody goes to vent. Find it, and you'll unlock a lot of insight that you didn't anticipate.
Yeah.
There was a second half to this.
Oh yeah, sorry. The second half. of the
other
question,
hats.
Wearing other hats and that you have worn or you still wear as a product manager.
We don't have product marketing, so like I interface with marketing and work together to do that. I've planned engineering nowadays. Ed planner.
It's fun.
Wait, hold on. I'm gonna back up. So, how many product people are at Credly?
One, just me.
So just you.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in a situation where you don't have a team. Like you are the team.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And we have some design resources, but like I've made mock-ups. I've made wireframes. They're not great, but like get an idea across. So I've dabbled into that a little bit. But those are probably the main ones. I can't code, and I'm pretty bad with SQL, so I can't do this.
So you've been an event planner, designer. What else? You've done a lot.
Yeah, marketing.
Marketing.
I'm not great at that either.
It's good to
So
know.
much art, though. Oh my gosh.
It's good to know like where your skills and strengths lie and where they don't. So you can be like, I know that I'm not the right person to do this.
Right.
I can call somebody else in.
Yeah.
What about you, Katie?
We have 7 today in the group, so there's 6 PMs and then myself. And so early stages, I was Scrum Master. We didn't actually even have Scrum when I first started. Engineering manager, build manager at some points, which was super fun.
Thanks.
It was all done on Post-it notes. We were very Wild Westy. It's like, hey, here's this ticket. We're gonna move this up. Okay, cool, let's go. So thankfully that hasn't been a thing for years now, which is great. But I think analyst often that's part of the job. And then before we had a strong marketing group, marketing in particular, helping them understand what the value was. Trainer, just depending. As your features go up, I've actually even done voiceover work for some of our videos before, just depending.
You have a nice voice.
Thank you, as do you. But yeah, you just do what you gotta do based on where you're at.
And I feel like that's attractive to a lot of people, right? Like you have to wear many hats. I guess that's probably like one of the very nice parts of it. That coming in as the first product manager, it's like over the course of the next couple of years, you're gonna wear every hat, right? And you've already worn every hat. And maybe there are a few that you still haven't hit yet, but you probably will at some point.
Yeah, it'll happen.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, we've got just about 11 minutes left, and there are a couple more really good questions to go. But I want to make sure that if anybody else has any other questions they want to drop in chat, feel free to drop them in. But we're going to get into prioritization. You kind of touched on this. So how do you handle differing opinions on your team about when it comes to prioritizing different features, or bugs, or whatever else? Do you have any advice?
In a perfect world, you have a company strategy that everyone's bought in on. We're in an OKR place. So this translates to OKRs. So
Can you define OKRs for those?
Sure. Objectives and key results. I'm trying to think. Measure What Matters is a good book about this. Google does this. So there's a company level objective that translates down to departments and then to individuals, what they're working on. So that helps. We've all bought into what we're trying to get done.
The thing about OKRs that blew my mind the first time I came across them said they're quarterly, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not like you're setting a 1-year goal. You're setting quarterly goals and they cascade down from the company.
Some people do a month. I don't know.
Wow.
That's a lot of overhead.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of
That's a lot of overhead.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. Continue.
So that helps. So we're all like, so if someone's like, hey, you got to build this thing, and you're like, well, we all agree that this quarter we're working on these things. Should I not do one of these things?
Mhm.
You know, so that helps. I think there's a lot of times where data can help here. So like it may, as a salesperson, it may seem like every single person who's showing up is asking for this integration,
Mhm.
but we're actually keeping track of that. So we can dig in and be like, oh, you know what, it's actually no one's asking for it any more than these others. Are you sure this is what we should spend our resource on? So data can help.
Mhm.
And then sometimes if you get down to an opinion, sometimes you just need to be like, well, let's find out what customers do by showing them something.
Mhm.
You think this is going to happen. You think this is too risky. Let's just make a prototype and find out.
That seems like that seems like a good amount of extra work to convince someone, like, all right, like this is why we think this is the most.
Yeah, but if you don't do that, you're making the wrong thing, and that's a lot of resources.
That's true.
Totally.
That's
Yeah.
true.
It's cheaper than building totally wrong things.
That's true.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah, and it can totally be worth it too, because at the end of the day, like as a PM, your opinion is important, but it's not the most important opinion. You know, it's about what your customer needs to be able to do and what is the most efficient way to get them there
Mhm.
in a usable way. Like that's the piece that I love the arguments about the how, especially with engineering, because they think, oh yeah, okay, well here's the fastest way that I can possibly do that. And that's still valuable,
Mhm.
but it's not necessarily valuable if they can't use it or figure it out.
Yeah, fine.
And so balancing those things together and saying, here's what I think, let's test it, let's validate it and make sure that it's the right approach.
Yep.
Especially if there's a change in strategy that's required and you can't convince someone with data,
Mhm.
it's a great way to say, I'm not the tiebreaker, our customer is the tiebreaker.
It's almost like you have to take, like, it's not a feelings job. It's
Right.
we're gonna make informed decisions job.
Some thought leader, I wish I could remember who it was, put forth this, I think, very contentious idea that if you're making decisions as a product manager, you're failing. It's very
Whoa.
contentious. I think.
Oh, yeah.
Hot
But
take.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
no.
underneath it is like you have been doing such a good job of presenting the insights from your customers,
Mhm.
the data from actual usage,
Mhm.
the strategic goals, that everyone who you're making a decision with is so informed that it will just work. That's your job.
Mhm.
Present them with everything they need. I'm not sure I'm bought into this idea, but I thought it was provocative.
It's very provocative.
I feel like philosophically, like I agree with that.
Right.
Like if you're doing a good job, then it's like it's not about like you shouldn't be making decisions.
Right.
It should be the team saying, oh yeah, we need to build
The
this.
team and the data and everything we've learned should be saying what the answer is.
It's almost like you are responsible for helping make an informed recommendation. And it's your team, like your cross-functional team that says, I agree with your recommendation, and there's your decision. But I think there's still got to be an element of like, you are the person or your core team, your triad, they're the people with the insight needed to make that informed recommendation. So
Yeah.
otherwise you're just dumping data on people's desks and saying, okay,
Right.
now you figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're down to our last couple minutes here, and 2 questions. Do you have any book recommendations and things that you found helpful as you were learning your role or skilling up, quote unquote?
I do. And one is if you're like interested in getting into product management, I found this book called Cracking the PM Interview. Remember this
I
one?
have not.
Cracking the PM interview. Okay.
Yes. So that actually like what you'll learn in it, like how to get a job at Google or how to get a job at Facebook may not be relevant, but what you'll see is like Facebook hires this kind of people for this role and this is what they have them do. Whereas this Google hires more like entrepreneurs or they hire more technical people and Microsoft calls them this. I just feel like it gave me a sense of like, oh, this is the landscape of the different ways that people are sort of slicing and dicing this role and the different words that they use. So I thought that was really helpful and made me feel more confident when I went into the interviewing process.
And then you interview with Google and Facebook after that?
Yeah, and I turned them down, you know.
Classic.
I'm all in on Minneapolis. No.
Right.
And then another book I've been reading recently is called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. I'm trying to up-level my strategy skills, and I just really liked the book. It's really good. It's a kind of an old classic.
I'm a big proponent of podcasts, but anything essentially from Simon Sinek with the idea of starting with why, whether it's YouTube videos or anything there. It's not a book.
How do you
But
spell his name? Simon.
it's
I've heard his name before.
Sinek, and I might totally be pronouncing it wrong. Sorry, everybody. But just the idea of how do you get down to the root of the problem? Why is it important for you to solve it? Like that's huge. And then the other thing I got a book from my boss called Radical Candor,
Oh yeah.
which isn't directly PM involved by any means, but it was actually super helpful for me in thinking about how to get over the Midwestern idea that if I don't share bad things with you, then everything's fine. And it's actually super helpful in making sure that there's a constant loop of feedback. You can minimize people's feelings getting hurt because you share it quickly and indirectly. So it's not a PM thing either, but it's a good supplement.
Has that helped you as a manager?
Totally. Yes. A lot of times I think there's this want to just save it all up for your one-on-one. Like, I'll talk to them about it on Thursday between 10 and 11.
Oh.
And that makes it further removed from the situation where your feedback is relevant.
Yep.
And so it can be hard to sort of trace it back to, why are we talking about this in the first place? Why in the world didn't you tell me about it before?
Mm-hmm.
But there's also the idea of, if, like I said, if you don't share it, then nobody's feelings will get hurt, but that doesn't make them a better person. And if my job as a manager is to make sure that they're better at their job and that they feel more equipped,
Mm-hmm.
not giving feedback is actually the worst thing I could do.
Oh man, I think an AMA on how to be a manager
That would be a good one.
I would
go to that.
I would mash subscribe. I would be the first person in line to that. Oh gosh. Okay. Last question, and maybe last question. You have 3 more minutes. Last question is, if you were talking to your past self, what is the number one thing that you wish you knew when you first started out? Like, if you could talk to yourself, if you could give yourself advice in the past, what's the first thing, or what are the things that you wish
We
you
were
knew?
given these questions ahead of time, yet I have not actually thought about this.
Okay, Katie, do you have anything?
Yeah, we could do the usability test of just sitting in silence. waiting,
Right,
but
let's
if
sit
you
on
want-
uncomfortable silence.
it's okay. It's okay to say I don't know, and it's okay to ask the question that you don't understand. There's a lot, I think, in some dynamics at companies where you want to posture yourself as the person who knows all of the things, and that's also totally okay. But there are helpful and healthy ways to frame questions that you ask to help you get better insight. Because if you don't ask, nobody will.
I think for me, it might be that there's a lot of ways to do this job well.
Mhm.
And I think when I started, I just thought like, oh, I've just got to find the cheat sheet
Mhm.
to figure out how to do this job exactly the right way.
Yeah.
And like, that doesn't exist. And so like, I think now I'm much more comfortable with that.
Mhm.
But starting out, it's, it seems like I think for a project manager, there's a bit of a template there. It's about delivering on time and communicating when things go wrong and, that kind of stuff. But it's not that kind of job.
It's clear what success looks like.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's less clear in product.
Yeah.
You kind of have to
That's
help
You define it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You define what success is.
This has been like it's giving you a lot to think about, right? This has been an amazing conversation. I think we're just about at time here. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I don't think we have any more questions, but to those of you that are still with us, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
Adrienne, Katy, thank you so much for giving us your time. I know scheduling a meeting like this in the middle of the day for a product manager is probably one of the most challenging things that you could be asked to do. So thank you so
But we
much
did it.
for
Yeah. High five.
Yeah.
very well
Yay.
done. This is what success
Hooray.
looks like, right? I'm not sure what the next AMA is going to be on.
Podcasting 101.
Oh, okay. The next virtual AMA will be on Podcasting 101. What's the date?
That'll be on February 12th.
On February 12th. And check the normal channels for how to sign up and join us then. And thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Bye, everybody.
Bye, friends.